Hey everyone, and welcome back to another Tuesday tip, where in this video I'm going to be showing you a way that you can use a single inner cable for a dual upper gyro cable setup without needing any ends on the cable. So at first glance, this might sound a little bit crazy, but I've been using this design myself for a few years now, and it's been working just as good as any other upper gyro cable setup that I've ever used, aside from the fact that when these break or when they're about to break, it is extremely easy to replace one of these and a lot cheaper to just replace the inner cable than to buy a whole new set of cables themselves. I've made a couple videos on this design in the past, but the first video was of the first version of these cables, and since then I've come up with a few better ways to put these cables together, and the second video shows just how to put them together and not how to install them. So I'm making this video today showing you guys how to put these cables together in the most up-to-date way that I've come up with and how to install them. Before we get into the video, I want to address a few concerns that people have had in the past about these cables. I personally think that these cables are stronger than conventional upper gyro cables that you can get, because these eliminate one of the extra points that a cable can break on a dual upper gyro cable setup. Normally what happens is you have two cables that come up through here, which have two ends here and two ends over here. This setup eliminates one of those ends and replaces it with just a bend in the cable. So rather than having a cable end that can break off, you have a bend in the cable that is just a loop that is being pulled on, and this breaks a lot less often than I experienced breaking on conventional dual upper gyro cable setups. The other thing that I want to address is the fraying on the ends in the gyro. This doesn't have to be this way. You can use end caps for your cables and they won't fray, and I've had a couple other ways that I've done it in the past, but I don't mind the fraying and it doesn't get in the way or poke me or anything like that ever, so I don't have any issues with it. And I think that these cables are definitely a viable alternative to conventional dual upper gyro cables, as I've been using them for probably 2 or 3 years now, and I've never had them catastrophically fail to the point where I've crashed or I've been in any type of danger. If they break exactly the same way as any other upper gyro cable setup or any other brake cable in general, and usually you can catch them before they're going to break, just like you can with any other brake cables. So with that being said, let's jump into how you actually put these cables together and the things that you're going to need. First of all, you're going to need a original conventional dual upper gyro cable setup, because we need to get this piece off of them. And I will take these apart now so I can show you what this piece looks like. This is the piece from a Snafu Astroglide dual upper gyro cable. As you can see, I've modified it a little bit in order to make it work with the Odyssey monolever. You might not have to do that, but you still need to get a hold of one of these pieces, which you can only really get if you buy the entire cable set. So what I would recommend is buying the cable set, using it until one of your cables breaks, or if you really don't care, you can take it apart and just go ahead with the process. So once you have this piece and it works with your brake lever, you're going to keep your cable housings from your dual gyro cable setup because they're already cut to length, and if there's nothing wrong with them, there's no need to replace them. So once you have these two pieces, all you really need from here is a brand new inner brake cable at full length. And obviously, aside from everything else that we've already listed, you're going to need some cable cutters. I recommend these Park Tool cable cutters because honestly, these things cut through cables like nothing I've ever used before, and it's not a struggle like it used to be for me. You're also going to need a gyro with set screws in it. That is how you're going to keep your cables in place and how you're going to use them without ends. And with that gyro, you're going to need an Allen wrench set or the proper size Allen wrench in order to tighten the screws down. So now we can get into making our cables. The first thing you're going to do is take your brand new long inner cable, you're going to fold it in half, and we're gonna cut it in half. And the awesome thing about this is that now we have 2 upper sets of cables from this one inner cable that just costs a couple dollars, rather than having to buy 2 full sets of upper gyro cables for about 10 or 12, maybe even $15 each. So now we're going to put the side with the end on it aside, because we're going to show this example with the cables that have no ends. And the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to bend this cable in half as well. But what we're going to do is take the end of it, and we're going to make sure that the end of this cable is overlapped about an inch, because when it comes to upper gyro cables, one side is longer than the other because it has to go farther. And we want to account for that so that when we put our housing on here, we don't have uneven lengths of cables sticking out the end and we'd have to work with less room on one side. So we're going to bend it in half. We're going to make sure that we follow it all the way to the bottom and that it stays overlapped the way we want it to. And we're just going to bend the cable so that it stays in half where we have it at. I'm going to set the bent cable aside for a second to talk about the next piece that we're going to need. This piece right here is a little bit more customizable in regards to this setup. What this actually is from a Diacomp front brake setup. It's the NARP that was used on the front brake, and I cut the end of it off. Basically what you're going to need here is something that is the same size as the end of a cable that also has a hole through it so that we can run our cable through it. And you want it to be about the same width as the end of a cable as well. This part is really customizable. You can use anything that will work, but I recommend using this piece, which I will link in the description below. You can get a hold of them and they're only a couple dollars. So I would recommend using this piece over anything else really. My first design used something else and it just wasn't as good as this. So once you have your piece, you're going to run it onto your cable up to the bend. And from here, what we're going to do is we're going to bend the cable on the top side of it as well. Bend it at as much of a 90 as you can. Pliers can help in this case, but you don't have to have them. Basically what we're doing here is trapping this piece on the cable and bending it so that there is not any excess in the cable and it has as much of a straight shot through the housing as possible. And as you can see here, this piece is rounded on one end. I found that it really doesn't matter which side is up in your brake lever, so you don't have to worry about that too much. So once you get the bend into the end of your cable, you're pretty much done with the modifying portion of things. Now you can grab the end piece that came with your original dual upper gyro cables, and you'll want to pay attention to which side of this piece has the indent in it, because this is to seat into your housing. So you want to make sure that you put it onto the cable on the side that the housing is going to come from. And you also want to pay attention too, because the bottom hole on this is the side that the short brake cable goes to. So this is the bottom, and you want to make sure that you put the shorter side through it. So we've got our cables here. We're going to take the short end of the cable and put it into the gyro piece, run it up onto our setup, and now we are ready to go down and install this, because everything from here is just installation. There's no more modification necessary. So let's move down into the brake setup and show you guys how to install this. First thing that we're going to need is our barrel adjuster for our brake lever. If we have one, we're going to put it onto the top part of our cable and then slide over the piece that came with our original upper gyro cables over the barrel adjuster. This piece, as you can see, is a little bit modified here. I had to do that to make it work with the Odyssey monolever, and I've got a video which I will put in an info card on the screen right here, as well as in the description on how you can do that too. And then from here, what we're going to do is slide it down a little bit to make our cables a little bit more flexible, and then we're going to put our piece that goes into the end of the brake lever into the brake lever, just like so. And then we're going to slide our barrel adjuster and piece back up and tighten it into the brake lever. And then from here we can grab our cable housings, and then we can put the inner cables into the corresponding sides, paying attention that one side is shorter than the other. So we put the top part of the cable into the long side, and then we put the bottom part of the cable into the short side. Then we seat everything where it should go, make sure the barrel adjuster is tight, and then we can put the other ends of our cables into the barrel adjusters that screw into our gyro plate. And now we're ready to move down to the gyro and install everything down here. Once you get the cables through the barrel adjusters that are screwed into your gyro plate, you're ready to start adjusting your barrel adjusters so that whenever you get your brake pull finished, there's not too much excess above or below the gyro. This is something that we want to calculate for before we tighten down these set screws in our gyro, so that we don't have to hurt the cable in one place, loosen it, and then readjust and tighten it in another. What we want to think about is that if there's too much excess below the gyro in the lower cables, we won't be able to engage our brakes, because when we pull the brakes, the gyro will hit the gyro plate before the brake pad engages with the rim, and that's not something that we want. We also want to pay attention to the upper cables, because if there's too much excess above the gyro in these upper cables, it means that whenever we let go of our brakes, there's too much excess and it doesn't let the brake lever return fully. And that also means that whenever we pull our brakes, we have to pull that excess out before we actually do anything with the gyro and before we can make our brakes engage. So we want to compensate for this and calculate for it, which I've done already. And this is something that you can only do with practice and tinkering, so you'll have to mess with it and figure it out for yourself. Just be aware that it is an issue and something to think about. And what I like to do here is pull on my cable to make sure that the excess is out of it, lift up just a little bit on the gyro, push in on the cable so that it's fully seated in the gyro, and then tighten the screw down. We can test it a little bit to make sure that we aren't bottoming out our gyro on the gyro plate, which we are not. We may have to lower these barrel adjusters just a little bit to make that distance a little bit further whenever the brake cable inevitably stretches. But from here, all we need to do is bend our cables up, and then we can cut off our excess and make sure everything is tight and dialed the way that we want it. And that's going to do it for this video about how you can use a single cable inner for a dual upper gyro cable setup. Hopefully this video was easy enough to follow for anyone who might want to try out this setup. If you guys do try it out, I would love to hear from you in the comments down below. I'm also here to answer any questions that you might have as well. If you guys enjoyed the video, hit the subscribe button down below. I make this tips and tricks video every Tuesday. I also make a BMX news video that comes out on Fridays with other types of riding videos and streams throughout the week. I want to thank you guys for being here and watching, and we'll see you tomorrow for another video. Goodbye.